Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States. Dr. Sebastian Gorka joins us now. Dr. Gorka, thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
This is a very serious day. People went to sleep last night concerned. Some people went to sleep last night actually reassured that America's position in the world was being restored following the destruction of the assurances that the international community used to have about when the American president said something, he did something. Under President Obama, the red lines were crossed multiple times. This president doesn't seem to be allowing Bashar al-Assad to get away with anything. My first question for you is, does this come off the back of the fact that the intelligence on the chemical attack is solid? Is this 100% an Assad chemical attack we're talking about?
I'm going to be very specific about my comments this morning, Raheem. We know that the best way to go to war is to protect certain information sources, methods, and to make sure the enemy doesn't know what you're going to do next. Surprise is incredibly important. So we act in a strategic fashion that's very different from the last 8 years. So to the first question of who executed the Tuesday attack, I would point your listeners to the statements made by the president and also by Rex Tillerson. And if you look at those statements since Tuesday, that you have the answer as to who's responsible. I'm not going to talk about percentages or how we know, but the fact that those statements were made can make everybody rest easy that, yes, the regime was responsible.
Okay, but you will understand why. The president himself has cast doubt on the intelligence community in recent months and over the course of the campaign too. And people will remember, it is still a recent memory for people, that, you know, the 45-minute weapons of mass destruction claim, the dodgy dossier, all of that. People are concerned about it. And you are a reassuring voice out there at the moment on behalf of this administration, saying that if this came from the Assad regime, then you know, Dr. Gorka, we know you, we like you, we will believe you. In which case, this gets us onto the imperative behind this attack. That means that there is a distinct and clear moral imperative. But the president yesterday said that this was a national security issue for the United States. Where is the strategic imperative here? How does this help the United States?
Very simply, because what we're talking about is the use of weapons of mass destruction against civilians. And I'm fully, cognizant of the fact that people are very leery about prior engagements. The UK dossier you mentioned specifically will go down in history as a misuse of intelligence analysis. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that you throw away all intelligence analysis simply when somebody politicized it once a decade ago or more than a decade ago. So the strategic imperative is very clear that these weapons not only are banned, they are being used against civilians. That is a global problem. We have sent a very clear message that when you do something as heinous, as evil, as using weapons of mass destruction against unarmed civilians, you will pay a penalty. And that's why it is in the U.S. national security interest.
Due respect, Dr. Gorka, that is the moral imperative. What I want to understand is how this helps secure the United States.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It is both at the same time, because you send a very clear message that these weapons cannot be used anywhere. It's a very clear national security message. So the global context affects America as much as it affects the people who were killed in that attack on Tuesday. So weapons of mass destruction are a global phenomena that have to be dealt with by a global strategy. So yes, I mean, the two things are not mutually exclusive, but the moral imperative and the national security imperative can overlap, and in this case they do.
Would you describe this attack as a success? I know that we're still hearing about what damage it did, and we're getting messages, breaking news across the AP wires at the moment about what the Russians are saying about this now. How many of the missiles actually got through? They're saying 23, and that 6 aircraft were destroyed. With the knowledge that you have, with what you've heard overnight, I'm sure you've had not much sleep, if any at all. Is this being considered a success in the White House and in military circles?
From the preliminary assessment, absolutely. Simply because of the damage that was done to the air base that was used for the chemical attack on Tuesday. If you look at the response globally from those countries that have responded positively, absolutely. However, it's early days. The metrics for the success of this will depend a lot upon what Damascus does next. But as far as we are concerned at this initial stage, yes, absolutely a success.
Cynics across the board, from long-standing supporters of the president to all the way across onto the left wings of the Democrat Party, there are cynics, and they are suggesting that this is simply a power play by the president. He had the president of China with him. He talked with, and he gave the presentation with King Abdullah earlier this week. He wants to get away from all the Russia hacked the election stuff. It's not been the best of news weeks. Does any of that to you strike you as even borderline acceptable as a thought process with this? And can you see where people are coming from that they would suggest it?
Look, having been in my current position for the last 11 weeks, I can believe anything. I mean, what this administration has put up with in terms of utter cynicism and politically motivated coverage of everything we do. Yeah, I mean,
Dr. Gorka, I asked a bad question. Let me rephrase it. The question is, what do you say to these people?
Okay. I say again, look at the speech made by our ambassador at the United Nations and look at those photographs. It is unconscionable for anybody, and I mean absolute. I don't care who you voted for on November the 8th. It is unconscionable for anybody to say we are making political theater out of the death and the injury that happened on Tuesday. We did this because there is both, as we discussed offline. There is a moral imperative and there is a national security imperative, and we have sent a very clear message. America is back. America is leading, and America will not be a feckless, spineless, non-actor in the international community. Those days are over. We will be politically chastised by those who do not recognize that we have a new administration. But so be it. We're used to it.
Can I ask why Senator Rand Paul has said overnight that he believes that the president should have come to Congress for authorization on this? Can you explain to us why the administration doesn't feel like it needed to do that in this case?
You just look at the last 60 years of presidential use of force, and this goes to a lot of the Breitbart readers. I want them to think about something for a second. Nothing has changed in the president's policy to the use of force in international affairs. He said during the campaign, and he's been explicit since he came into office, that he is not interested. This is not the second Bush administration. We are not interested in invading countries and occupying them. He understands why that is not a good idea and why fundamentally it's un-American. We were born in rejection of imperialism, not to reinforce it. So this is not Gulf War, nor is this 2003. This is a cruise missile strike against an air facility involved in the chemical attack on civilians. People need to understand that. This is not a full-throated war deployment. It is a surgical strike using missiles. And I'd like people to think about that for a second. I understand the isolationist imperative, but weapons of mass destruction are in a very special category.
You will understand that when you say weapons of mass destruction, I get this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach about what's coming next. How do you stop the train once it's in motion? We know how these things work. We've seen them develop before.
Right. I don't need to, because I know the president. I know the president, and I know what he thinks.
So you're saying this is 100% a one-off. This is a guarantee that this is a one-off.
I'm not gonna, again, we don't give our playbook away, okay?
Well, somebody said it was a one-off last night, so somebody's giving the playbook away.
That's their prerogative. But what I'm saying is, I know the president, and I know his attitude to what happened in the last 16 years. And you can take that to the bank, my friend.
Okay. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, just one last thing before I leave you here. We are obviously hearing the response from the Russians at the moment, saying that they're going to help strengthen the air defenses in Syria, pulling out of this agreement over the safe airspace to avoid air collisions as well. We're hearing all sorts of things, and I doubt this will be the last we hear of it over the next couple of hours and indeed days. What response do you think Russia is going to take at this point, and do you believe that every eventuality has been considered here to allow the US public to feel safe that we are not entering a war or proxy war with Russia over this?
Yeah, look, there's absolutely no need to fear for any broader escalation. The Russian government will decide what it's going to do next. That's, it's a sovereign state. But even when you have satrapies, even when you have client states, there comes a time where you have to decide whether it is in your personal interest to maintain that relationship. And I would say that when that state, when that client starts to use chemical weapons against its own populace, then the calculus changes. The comments being made, we understand the comments being made, but there is a point at which this kind of sponsorship is no longer in the interests of the sponsoring state. So we are completely confident that we have this in the category in which it's going to stay.
Well, I will say this: you said the pajama boys were gone, and you promised they'd go, and you've certainly lived up to that. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thank you so much for joining us here on Breitbart News Daily.